All right. Well, welcome back to episode 18 of the Community of Wisdom Seekers. And tonight, the wisdom sharer is my personal pastor, Scott Parks. He is the shepherd at Restoration Church, Wichita. And it's where I've been attending. Man, I keep losing this number, but I think it's 6 or 7 years.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
started coming shortly after the church plant happened, and have a little bit of a unique story behind that I might share a little bit later on. But I would like to dive right in and really just get to know your story. And I did mention this when I went live a little earlier about you just being somebody that is very obedient and very courageous and bold. When God calls you to something, you move. And I know that may not have always been the case, but the way you tell your story, I know it emboldens the body, it emboldens the family that we have at Restoration, and I know it's emboldened me in my faith to step out and to really be courageous when God calls me. So I really appreciate you personally, and I just love hearing your story. And what I'd like to do is just open up with you just telling us a little bit of your start. I know that your first calling into ministry was to get into ministry. And so if you could just give us a little bit of that, and then really just take us from there. How did it progress when you were in California? That's where you're originally from. And then how did you end up in Wichita? And then kind of what's happened since then?
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you, Daniel, for having me tonight. I'm not sure how much wisdom you'll get, but it'll be a good conversation. So I grew up in San Diego and grew up in a Christian home, loved God, but at 16 years old, going into my junior year, God really transformed my heart. And he really just changed a lot in me. And I remember at a summer camp, and the speaker one night was talking about, if you're called to ministry, come down, I want to pray with you. And I was like, cool, I'm not called. I'm going to sit back and just relax. My dream was to be a high school history teacher and to coach. So I'm like, I can get summers off, I can coach sports, I can teach history. I love that. And the Holy Spirit started just ripping on my heart, like, I go up there, go up there, go up there. I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. Like, that is not for me. Absolutely not. And the Holy Spirit just would not stop. Just go down there, go down there, go down there. So I kind of just said, okay, God, I'll go down there, but I'm still not going to do this. Like, I'm not going to be a pastor. So I went down, they prayed with me. I'm like, okay, cool. I did my little thing. Now leave me alone. I don't want to be in ministry. And the Holy Spirit just wouldn't stop, just wouldn't stop, wouldn't stop, wouldn't stop, just on me for weeks afterwards. And kind of make a long story short, I finally made an agreement with God one day. I said, look, if I'm going to do this whole ministry thing, I can't, because I didn't think I was a good speaker. And I said, God, I get excited. I stutter. I can't pronounce words. I yell. Like, I'm very passionate. Like, this whole thing is not for me, but you won't leave me alone. So if this is what you want me to do, here's the agreement I'm going to make with you today. If you ever don't show up, if I ever get up to speak and I've invited you and I've leaned on, if you ever don't show up, that next day I get to quit. And what's interesting is at 16, God opened up an opportunity for me to speak at a youth ministry. And that wasn't mine. And opened up all these doors from 16 years old up until today. And so I started in youth ministry. That's where a lot of pastors start. And that's what I started doing, was youth ministry. I thought I was in youth ministry forever. I wanted to be 60 years old doing youth. But again, God eventually changed that and kind of catch up to where we are today. Restoration Church, we planted it 8 years ago. But I'm from San Diego. My wife's from Los Angeles. And Wichita is a little bit different than those two cities. And so we were at a point in our ministry life where we just said, okay, God, wherever you want us to go, whatever you want us to do. We came to a point where we're a little frustrated with some stuff. And so I put my stuff online for the first time. Never done it before. Put my resume online. If you want to call me. And churches started calling. And I got this one church that called me from Derby, and I know where Derby was. I'm like, where's Derby? Well, it's by Wichita. Where's Wichita? I didn't know where any of this was. And I talked to the pastor, I remember, and And I said, no, man, no. I'm from San Diego. Like, I am not moving to Kansas. I've never been to Kansas, no desire to go to Kansas. I'm not going to Kansas. Thanks, but no thanks. And then the next week, another church called me from Wichita. Like, what in the world is the deal with these churches in Kansas? So the executive pastor was talking to me, and I was like, man, I just don't think so. I don't think that's where I want to go. No, I'm just thanks, but no thanks. And then about a few weeks later, the senior pastor calls me, look, will you just come out here and just check it out? I'm like, fine, if you want me to come out, you want to pay for my trip, I'll come out. And we came out, I came out first, then my wife and I both came out a few weeks later. And I just fell in love with the city. And God did something right away in my heart towards this city. And so I was a youth pastor and young adult pastor here in the city for a couple of years. Then a church that I was a part of way before asked me, they had planted another church and it was exploding, asked me to come in and be the executive pastor and kind of build some systems and teams. And so we did that, went back to California. And at that point, God started working on a heart to plant. I never wanted to plant a church. I'm a very logical person. And so in my mind, there's enough churches out there with buildings and people with no vision. I can come in, I can fix it, I can get some vision. Why start from scratch? But God started putting on our heart to plant and to plant and to plant. So as we were praying about it, my wife and I had this conversation. Here's how it went. He said, God, if we're going to plant a church, we want to give our life to one city. So tell us which city we are called to so we can give our life to that city. We had been in Alaska a number of years before for a missions trip, and I met this staff who felt called to Alaska. And I'm like, man, I want that. Like, I want to experience. I've been called to churches I felt before, to go into youth and that kind of stuff, but I never felt called to a location. I want that. So God, if you're going to call us to plant a church, you need to call us to a city. Again, we are still thinking Southern California, San Diego, Los Angeles, somewhere in the middle. Like we're thinking Southern California. The church I was at previous brought me back in the summer of 2011 to speak at their summer camp. And it was funny. We hadn't told anybody about what was going on in our hearts. But we're about to get on the plane, and my current senior pastor Tom called me and said, Scott, I don't know what's on your heart, but whatever God's telling you, just do it. We're going to be okay. And I told Candace, I said, then Mark just kind of gave us the green light. And that was a big concern for me. God, if I leave, like he needs me, I can't just abandon him. But then God took care of that situation. And we get off the plane at the old Wichita airport, and we looked at each other and we said, this makes no sense, but we're called to this city. So every single morning during the summer camp, I got up early in the morning. The camp was in McPherson. I'm driving around McPherson, praying, talking to God. God, I can't do this. God, we don't have funds for this. God, I'm not a fundraiser. God, this is no, we can't. And finally, by the end of the week, it's okay, God, I can't, but you can. And our statement began to be, God, if it's your will, it's your will. If you're in this, you got to take care of this. So that was July of 2011. Went back home after camp, told my senior pastor. He started laughing. He said God had already told him I was supposed to plant a church in Wichita. He was just waiting for me to let it happen. And so that was July of 2011, and we were going to plant January of 2012. Now, if you don't know if you're familiar with church planting, that's pretty fast. And we didn't have funds. We didn't have anything like that. So I came back once a month to build this core team. And these meetings were terrible. I'm not from Wichita. I'd already been gone from Wichita. So we're trying to find people. We're looking for churches and that we knew. And there's handfuls of people at meetings, not very many people. And every meeting I'm telling people, if you're looking for a church that's all about you, if you're looking for Disneyland, don't come to Restoration Church. And Candace is fun, like, Scott, you want people to go to the church, right? I'm like, yeah, but I don't want a consumer-driven church. I want a gospel-driven church, and I don't know how to convey that. And so I was just telling people, don't come to our church, don't come to our church. So our launch team had a group of about 11 adults, counting my wife and I, and 13 kids. That was our launch team. We had a little bit of money saved, we got rid of our house in California, and we were about to move to Wichita. But even finding a place to live in Wichita, it was confidence. How much faith do we have? Do we have $700 a month faith? Do we have $800 a month faith? Because we didn't know where we're going to live. Because we didn't have income, we didn't have anything. The church that I was leaving the last Sunday, they were taking an offering for me, and I said, you know what, you're in a building campaign. I don't think you should take an offering. God will take care of us. And the pastor told me, you know what, because you're thinking about us, even the last Sunday you're here, we'll pay your salary for 3 months. So I had 3 months salary. I had a little bit saved. We sold or got rid of, gave away half of all we owned, moved from our nice house in California to an apartment in Wichita. And we just said, okay, God. I mean, I got to tell you, though, the first day we moved in, and I was emotional. We couldn't fit my stuff in the apartment. And we had given away so much. We had sold and we still couldn't fit in the apartment. And I'm like, God, are you kidding me? Like, what am I doing? I was at a large church, had a nice salary, had all this stuff. Now I can't even fit my stuff in an apartment. I don't know how I'm going to feed my kids. And so we just said, okay, God, we're trusting you. And so we started the church January 15th of 2012. At Peterson Elementary School. The reason why Peterson, because every other school was getting their tornado buildings built. So there wasn't even a school that we could rent. And so we get into this school, and I remember the first Sunday standing at the door, not looking into the parking lot, because I didn't want to see an empty parking lot. I didn't want to see nobody show up. And I'd making these videos on Monday, like just every Monday making a video, sharing the heart for the church. And all of a sudden I turn around and all these people start walking in. And I'm like, who are these people? And some people I didn't even know. Some people I did know. And they're all walking in. Some people said, we're coming 1 week to support you. And then we're leaving. They never left. And it just became this thing. And after 3 weeks, we found the current building that we were in. It was the old Faith Baptist building. And there was a small congregation, didn't have a pastor in the sanctuary, so we rented the gym. That's where Daniel found us running one day. He ran one Sunday morning and ran into the church. Said, I'll come back. I'll change my clothes, take a shower. And we had a small group of people in the gym. And we had nothing. We just said, okay, God, we don't have anybody paying our bills. We didn't fundraise $300,000. We're just going to trust you. And we've been, since day one, we've trusted God, and God has been so faithful. And I never want to get to that place where we're so comfortable to live on faith. We need to live on the edge of faith. And that's kind of where we've stayed. That's where we've been with our mission stuff, with our local stuff, with everything we do. It's God, we're on this edge of faith where if you don't show up, we will fail. You have to show up or this will not work. And just like he told me at 16 years old to today, he's never not shown up. He always shows up. So that's a little bit of my story.
Awesome, Scott. I really appreciate that. And man, it's always so good. I well up a little bit every time you tell the story. So it seems to get easier, but maybe not. So I would like you to tell a little bit about some things that have happened since you've opened up. Obviously, I mean, a lot of the emotion I was feeling was, it wasn't just coming out here to plant a church, but you're also leading your household, leading a wife, 2 kids, and you're responsible for them. And so it's like you're moving into this space where you can't fit everything in. You don't know where finances are going to come from. And there's just so much. I was just imagining all that hitting at once with the thought. But beyond that, how he's shown up faithfully for you, for the church, and what are some things that have come of that? So I know we have some international things going on. I would like to hear about your Mount Kilimanjaro. And when you bring things to us, as an individual in the congregation, a lot of times I do think, how in the world will that ever happen? And then when it does happen, that's probably why I get emotional, because it's so big. It's hard to believe it can happen. And then when it does, the only explanation is that God did it. And that's what I found with that being on the edge of faith, is like, that's what we're called to do, because we're leaning on him to get it done. And it forces us to give him the glory. So tell us a few things that you God probably gave you those visions, and you're like, I don't know how we're getting this done, but I'm going to tell the church and we're just going to go for it. I'd love for you to share some of that.
Well, even when we started it, we had the church paying our salary for a couple months. We had some money saved, and our whole plan was, okay, after that's out, I'm going to work at UPS at nights because I can work part time and get some insurance, and then I'll work in the day for the church. That never had to happen though. Like God just grew us fast enough where that didn't have to happen, and we thank Him for that. We were willing to do it, and I think that's kind of where our whole journey's always been. I'm dumb enough to trust Him, and we're willing to do whatever. When I was a youth pastor, we did a lot of missions work, and I enjoyed it. I really, really did. But God just gave me a different vision to how to do missions. And I remember when we started Restoration Church, reaching out to people, telling them, hey, this is what we're going to do. This is my vision. And I heard this same answer over and over and over again. That sounds really cool. I don't know how it's going to happen. That's not really our vision, but good luck with it. And okay, well, I'm going to get on a plane with some strangers and we're going to go figure it out. And so 3 of us did. That's how I met Carl for the first time. And, we didn't have this long relationship. A friend of a friend introduced us, and we jumped on a plane and we went to Uganda with Nathaniel and in Kenya, and we just started figuring it out. And God just has put everything together. And I think that's the thing, is that God's plan for your life is always bigger than you. I believe that. I believe, and this doesn't mean some big grandiose things to make you famous. It's not what I'm saying. But it's going to push you out of your comfort zone. If your plan for your life can be accomplished by you, then it's not by God, not from God. Because when the plan's bigger than you, now He gets all the credit. He gets all the glory. Daniel, you didn't say, well, Scott, you're so great. That's how you figured it out. It's like, I know Scott's not that great. I don't know how he's going to figure this one out. And I don't. God just works it out. And so that's what we've done since day one. We call them God dreams. We want our church to have God dreams. So it's not just Scott's dreams. It's restore, rebuild, release. We want our people to grow a relationship with God, hear from God, get a God dream, and then we'll start it. So a lot of things we do today aren't started from me. It's people in our church who had this dream, and I'm like, let's do it. And we just figure it out, and we do it. Now, not everything works, but a lot of things have worked. But there's a lot of people and do a lot of different stuff. And then a couple years ago, I was looking at our international stuff and our local stuff, and I'm like, God, we give away a huge portion of our money every year, and we don't have enough to do this. So we got to do something. So I thought, I'm going to climb Mount Kilimanjaro, and the tallest freestanding mountain in the world, living in Wichita, Kansas. Well, it's not even a tall hill. And so I'm going to go and we're going to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. So I spent a lot of time at Sedgwick County Park, up and down the little hill, trying to raise money. And my goal was to raise money in California with people who were never going to be a part of this, who can get behind it. And we raised a lot of money. I raised a lot of money from California. And it was great. And so we went and climbed this mountain. But what was crazy is I thought it was about a mountain and raising money. I started working out a gym, and then all the people in the gym started wanting to climb with me. Then there's a mountain in the gym where they're talking about what's your mountain, and the owner of the gym's climbing the mountain with me. That gym has sponsored many, many kids overseas and getting them in school with us and fed. So here we are. I'm thinking it's so small, and it's already so much bigger than me. Like, how am I going to do this? All I can see is one little piece. And as you step, God's like, I got this, and I got this, and I got this. And now people want to climb again. And I'm like, I'm not climbing Kilimanjaro again. Let's do another mountain that's easier. So now we're doing Machu Picchu in Peru. There's like 20 people now that want to climb with us. And I'm like, okay, great, you can climb with us. I raised $500 for some kind of charity. And so, God He's got it all worked out. We're responsible for the yes. And He'll take care of everything else. And so I've just learned, if I just say yes, He's got it all worked out. And I just got to continue to say yes. That's kind of where we live. We just tell God yes, and we trust Him.
Awesome. So if you could give us a little bit of feedback, you did on the climb, kind of the small vision that you had that you might have thought was a big vision, right? Which was an accomplishment, being able to do that yourself personally and the team that you brought with you. But then the snowball effect, right, that it had as it went down the hill, as you're going up the hill, with just impacting a gym, impacting, the owner, and then obviously impacting children overseas that may not have had that kind of financial support any other way. And just to know that that happened. Let's talk about a little bit about the mission work and really what's come of that. I think that is just so, every time I hear it, I'm like, I don't even know how we manage that. But and then what we do as a church to keep that relationship there. And that's what I've noticed. The mission is more relationship based. It's more about pouring into the people and really almost correcting some things in some ways, because there is some misconceptions based off of what they see on TV and radio over there. So if you could give us some of that, that would be great.
So there's a couple of different things we do missions wise, but the heart of everything we do is always the gospel. But the other part of that when it comes to international is I feel like, again, this is my opinion, not that I'm right, just how I see it. I just feel like for too long, the Western world gets too much of the credit, and we're the heroes. And so we show up and we build a building, we put our name on it. I take a picture in front of it. Look what I did. Well, the truth is, I didn't do it. And if I did do it, they have to fix it when I leave because I'm not a builder. And if I did do it, then it's not theirs. And so what we want to do is empower local people to live out their own God dreams. So even when it comes to the things that we do internationally, it's not my dream for their village. It's their dream for their village. It's their dream for their city. It's their dream for their church. So we make relational connections. God, bring us the right people. Bring us the person we want to work with. And we find that person and we hear what God's putting in their heart, and then we help them live it out. And we're not getting the credit. We're not seeing my picture on posters. We're not doing any of that stuff. Now, there are restoration churches internationally. They just took our name and said, we want to be a part of you. And so we do have, and we've planted churches now, but that was never our goal to have our name on anything, for my name to be anywhere. But we wanted to make Jesus famous, and we wanted to highlight the local church and let them know that their God is big enough to use them to reach their own people. And that's what we've done. And so that's taken on all different types of forms when it comes to, again, simple things like starting businesses or getting kids in school, to feeding programs, to starting churches, to trainings, in India, even doing classes to help reach people who aren't even saved, who couldn't even go to church. And now what's crazy with the COVID stuff going on internationally, when there's lockdown, which they all are locked down right now, even though every nation's different when it comes to the cases, but they're all locked down. They don't have any stimulus checks coming in. They don't have any unemployment coming in. So when they're locked down, they starve to death. And so what we've been spending a lot of our time doing is talking to these people and sending money. But what's cool is we already have relationships with these people, and then these churches get the money, and then they go out and feed the people. So they don't need to know there's Americans behind it. They just know the church in their area is taking care of their practical need. So again, we're elevating the church, giving the opportunity to share the gospel, and give them the tools they need to help their own people. So that's in a nutshell kind of what we do.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. One thing that came to mind as you were talking was just about being gospel centered. And that's one thing I really appreciate most about what I receive from you in leadership at Restoration. And it's not about the numbers. It's not about filling up seats, although we have seen some growth come over the last couple of years with a little bit of expansion. But I know that's something you always really talk against, and one thing you always reinforce. And I think it's so important. And what came to me is the thought of the places that may want to fill up seats and may want to entertain more. It is more about the people. It's more of a consumeristic worldview. And really, in our society and our culture, that's just the way things are. And unfortunately, it's crept into the church. But what I think of is it's like a large army that has really dull knives and no armor, which doesn't really do us a whole lot of good, right? If we have an army that can't defend themselves and can't fight. And what I've found for my own walk at Restoration and with you leading is that, I've been able to sharpen the sword. I've been able to put on more armor. I've been able to want to have a better and deeper relationship with my Creator, with Christ. And so I just really appreciate that about you. But the thought I have in question is, how do you keep yourself in that place? Because I know that can be hard when you're leading. I work with a lot of Christian businessmen, and when they start doing well, sometimes it's difficult to put themselves in check. And so what are some things you do to keep yourself in check and continuing to put yourself in the right place to pursue what God has on your heart?
It's a great question. Well, kind of give you a little bit of a backstory. Maybe this might help a little bit. When I was in California, God opened up some doors for me at a young age, in my mid-20s, to lead ministries that would be nationally recognized for their size. And it was interesting to be in your mid-20s and being in places like that, speaking on stages like that, to where if you want to sell something, people would buy it. One of the things that somebody asked me one day, what are you selling your material for? And I said, I'm not, and they can have it. And they're like, well, why? Like, that really, so you're so noble. No, it wasn't. It was fear. And my fear was that it would change me. And I was afraid that if I started selling stuff, then I would start writing or speaking things I knew would sell. And so for me, even as a young man, I was afraid of what that would do to me. And then I remember I was speaking 7 services a week, had a bleeding ulcer, was in the hospital, and I went to Tacoma, Washington for a ministry trip, and I was in the hospital with hives all over my body. My face looked like Hitch, the movie Hitch, when he has his exposed, like it looked like that. My tongue was swelling shut, my lips were huge, my ears, everything was huge. And I go to the hospital and give me all these shots, all from stress. So here I was, I had everything that somebody would want, but yet on the inside, I'm dying. And the big thing came for me was I got married, and I'm a workaholic. Like I'm still at work right now. I'm at church still. Like I work a lot. And so when I got married, after a little bit of time in that setting, my wife told me one day, she said, Scott, I don't have a husband. I have a roommate. And when you're here, you're not even here mentally. And so I went to my executive pastor. We were in the middle of building a $47 million facility. And when I was first hired, I was one of 3 youth pastors, and I was the only youth pastor trying to handle all this. And I was literally dying from stress. And I went to him and said, I need some help. God doesn't require me to marriage to be successful, and I don't know how to balance this. I can't. And they told me, the executive pastor told me, Scott, you won't leave this. Nobody leaves this. You're 25, 26 years old. You're not going to leave this. And so I chose my wife that day over the success, over that. And so I honestly think that was that defining moment for me, to where I had a choice to make. Do I want my name to be known, or am I okay being a nobody? And I chose being a nobody. And when you step off that stage and you choose to be a nobody, it's not hard to stay a nobody because you're really smart and everybody wants you to speak and all this. When you're on that stage, when you're not on that stage for a little while, people forget about you very, very quickly. And no more, hey, come sit at the head table with me. Now I'm just nobody. And I'm okay with that. When I die someday, I want my kids still to love me and love Jesus. I want my wife still to love me and love Jesus and love his church. And that's more important to me than me being known. And so that's always been my goal, or at least it was at that point, when I think there was probably moments where I really enjoyed the lights. But then when I made that choice, it's okay. It's about the gospel and making disciples, period. And never promote yourself, gospel and disciples. And it's becoming easier, to be honest. It's not harder now. It's easier. But it took a defining moment to get off that stage and pick what was right versus my flesh and what I wanted.
You bring up another thought with it getting easier. I think in a lot of ways that's how our faith works. When we step out, at the beginning it was planting the church for you, and then from there it was the missions work, and then it was Mount Kilimanjaro. So, it's kind of interesting because as I reflect, you telling me about Mount Kilimanjaro, it was just no big deal. You're like, yeah, that's what we're gonna do. I'm like, what the heck? Yeah, I had to research it because I didn't really know what was going on. And when I did, I was like, what are we doing here? And but you just have that, and I've noticed that as I've seen people grow in their faith, it just gets easier. Now the mountains tend to get bigger,
Mhm.
however you can just lean on what he's done before and always been faithful. And then you look in the Bible, it's the same exact situation where people just continue to grow their faith. It's a muscle. We got to exercise it. And the truth is, it can go the other way. Like you mentioned, you had a decision to make, and you could have made that decision. God's given us that free will to go that other direction. And had you done that, you might have all the lights and the fame and the finances that came from you selling your products and giving into that, but may not have the family, may not have children where they are now. And, when it comes to the deathbed, I think we all will reflect on that. And I just heard something yesterday say, you never heard a daddy say he held his, babies too long.
Mhm.
Right. And no one has it on their gravestone. I wish I would have spent more hours at the office.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, you speak directly to that. It's just very good. So
I want to make
awesome,
it clear.
Scott.
I'm not saying anybody's wrong
Yeah.
who has that stuff. It was wrong for me
Yeah.
because I think it would have changed me,
Good.
and I wasn't strong enough for it.
Yeah. And that's important to recognize too. I think sometimes we can get in that, mindset of judging others because their path's different and what God's calling them to is different and it looks different. And we just have to understand God uses all of us differently. We're all gifted differently. And we just really want to be more of an encouragement. And there's time for correction as well. But, there's a lot of times I see that condemnation coming versus just being curious and being supportive and more helpful. So that's good. But I really appreciate you coming on tonight, Scott. Really a lot of value and just so encouraging. And I know that those watching live and those that'll get the recording later will be encouraged as well. If there is anything you want to say here and just like a final statement, ways to just, I know you don't want to be put in the light, but ways to just find you, connect with you. Maybe there's people that just want to seek more truth, more understanding, and want to just have a conversation. Where's a good place to find you?
Always on my Facebook, Scott Parks, so easy to find. Also, our church, Reformation Church Wichita. You can find us on our Facebook there, our Instagram. Ourchurch.life is our website. But just a closing thought for you is look, when you get to the end of your life, Daniel already said it, the things that we're valuing maybe in this moment, we won't be valued then. And so really start trusting God. Start living big dreams. Again, I'm not saying you do some grandiose, huge thing. Maybe it's forgiving someone, and that's way bigger than you. I can't do this. Well, you can't. You're right, but God can. Do you trust Him with it? Do you trust Him with your hurt? Do you trust Him with your wound? Do you trust Him with your money? Do you trust Him with your kids? Maybe you're just a helicopter parent because you just can't. I gotta protect them. I gotta protect them. I gotta protect them. Well, can you trust God with them? Maybe that's your mountain, and start trusting God. And the more you do, the more you'll strengthen that muscle. And then you'll be able to trust Him more and more and more and more. Once you realize that He is good and that He is faithful and that He is there, it's easy to climb a mountain because you know He'll see Him there.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott. Appreciate you. And thank you all for watching. And that is a wrap of this episode. And I look forward to seeing you all in the future. God bless.
Thanks, bud.